Hi, I'm Daisy,
Hi, I'm David.
and we're the MSA Crusaders.
Welcome to MSA Crusaders. Today we are joined by our very first guest with us on our podcast, Alison Lattimore. Yay, how are you
Hello.
doing, Alison? Welcome back
Hey,
to the show.
Alison.
It's been a year.
I can't believe
Yeah,
it's been a whole year.
it's been 366 days.
Wow. Wow. Crazy, huh?
So does it seem like a year that we started MSA Crusaders?
No, no. Came across you and said, hey, I'd like to do that. And you guys said, hey, let's do it. And there we were, and now we are.
Yeah, can you remind the viewers about your husband with MSA?
Sure. He was diagnosed in 2018. He passed away October 2020. And he was one of the, I don't know if you want to call it fortunate ones, that did not have to go too deep before he passed away. Putting it bluntly, I guess. But he got as far as talking about getting into a wheelchair before he passed away. And it was a sudden thing. And but I look at it as a blessing because he did not have to
Absolutely.
suffer the
Yeah.
worst of the worst. So yeah.
Absolutely.
We've been married 34 years at the time, and we have two wonderful boys that are adults, and I have two grandchildren. He met the first one, not the second one, but only through FaceTime.
Oh,
That's okay for now.
well, I'm so glad he had to go through being in a wheelchair and all the pain and suffering that he had to endure.
Exactly.
He was very lucky.
Yeah, I mean, he was still able to get up with his walker,
Hmm.
and he was just starting to say, "I think I might need a wheelchair." And I said, "Let's keep moving. You're still moving until you really can't get up out of that chair. Let's keep moving." And he always listened to me, so I'm
You're
like,
so good for him.
you know, kept him moving as much as I could, and it just, it was a
And
very much a shock. So
what he passed in his sleep?
no, I had gone to bed, and he usually stayed up later than I did, and he called me. He'd been in the bathroom and had fallen to the floor and couldn't get up. So he had an Apple Watch on, and he called me from the Apple Watch saying, "Help." And of course, I tore down there. And by the time I dragged him out of the bathroom because I couldn't get him up in the bathroom, there wasn't enough room, he had died. So started CPR, called 911, started CPR, but I was pretty sure. I was pretty sure this was it. Even without, I don't think the CPR would have made any difference whether it was me or anybody else doing it. So,
Yeah. So you're thinking maybe the autonomic issues with him caused him to fall and subsequently pass away.
yes, I've done a lot of thinking in the last 4 years because he died 4 years ago. I I didn't have an autopsy, but he was one of those folks that had problems with his lymphatic drainage, his lymphatic system. So he had the swollen ankles and the swollen legs. And I remember thinking, like 2 days before, I helped him up to the bathroom. So I was behind him thinking, man, his legs are getting big. And I was thinking it was swelling. And so I really, and I've talked to a few people, particularly nurses, who think that it was either pulmonary edema that was the end, or possibly congestive heart failure, but leaning toward the pulmonary edema, which means that, the swelling in the lungs, that he couldn't breathe because of the way he looked when he died. So
Yeah, I asked that because my wife yesterday or the day before we're talking about when the end comes, and she asked, she said, would you like to have an autopsy so we can confirm why you died? And I said, well, I'll be gone at the point at that point, so it really doesn't matter. But some people want to have black and white written why we passed away, and some people don't need it, doesn't think it adds any value. And she's the same way. She knows what it is, and having an autopsy report is just going to bring back more pain, for no reason for her.
well, I mean, I think so. there's so when I was asked about it, in my head, the first thing I thought was I had to pay for it. I have no idea who pays for the autopsy. So in my mind, I was thinking I had to pay for it. So I said no, because he wouldn't have. He would have said, "Don't bother." You know, he would have
Yeah.
said, "I died from MSA. Don't bother."
Yeah.
Subsequently, though, I mean, I've thought long and hard about it, obviously. So in some respects, I kind of wish I had, because I would know definitively what actually happened. But I've made peace with that.
I do plan to have a breakdown on it. Just so I found one out, and so that they'll be able to have some more research.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the person, right?
Yeah.
But on the same token, some people have had like the brain donated. I've read about that, and oftentimes it's not MSA, it's something else, but they all are, things that are related to MSA in terms of what the symptoms are, because MSA is so hard to diagnose because it looks like so many other things. So,
Right.
you know, frankly, to me, ultimately, it doesn't matter.
Have you,
He's not here.
have you been involved with any charity events or anything where you would say?
I haven't, other than to donate. I will do some of the donations, like Pam Bauer put it out for the Path to a Cure, and
Mhm.
I donated to that, but I haven't gotten involved. I've actually been working and super busy, and I had originally thought I was going to do that when I wasn't working, to honor my husband, but then I got working, and I'm just like swamped. So I don't have much room.
Understandable. Life goes on, unfortunately.
Mm. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. So, yeah, I mean, it's just, it is. I try to do the donations as much as I can, though. And I'm actually sort of toying, well, I've got to look it up, but our local school has a marathon dance every year. And it's usually local recipients that get the money, but they will take some charities as well. And I'm thinking of filling out the form to ask for some of the money to go to MSA. So, just particularly because like my kids were involved in it, I was involved in it, and you know, there's a lot of money that gets generated through this town for that. So, just haven't done. I keep talking about it, and then by the time I realize I want to do it, and I'm glad we're talking because I'm going to look it up afterwards. It's usually after the fact, like, oh, all the letters have gone out and they're not accepting more, and I'm like, oh, I've lost it again. So.
Time gets away from us.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, very much so. So.
Well, I
That is my
mean,
life.
the worst thing you can do is not do anything and not think anything and not speak anything, right? That's always having him and MSA in your mouth and your words and is probably is good enough for most people,
Yeah.
Exactly.
I figure whatever way I can do it, and if it means that sometimes I'm just giving money, I'm still doing something. And I always pass around, on like Facebook, I always pass around to my friends saying, this is what my husband died from. If you'd like to donate, I'd appreciate it, blah, blah, blah. So at least I do it on that realm anyway.
That's great. There has been some research on diagnosing the MSA, but I'm still kind of out left field about that diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
It's more inconclusive still. There's still need to research.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
even if you have the right doctors looking for the right clinical signs, it just starts so differently in everybody, which is why the diagnosis is so hard to get, because how I started it is not how Daisy started, it's not how your husband started. We all start differently and get worse differently. So it might be true that most of us may not even have it at the time of death. It might be some other disease or something completely different. There's so many diseases that mimic it that it's we don't know, unfortunately.
I was reading
Exactly.
the other day that someone was diagnosed with ALS. And I was like, wow, that's what that you even thought could be diagnosed.
But and it kind of makes sense. I use ALS as my example because when I literally when someone asks me, what is MSA, I always say multiple symptom atrophy, meaning that multiple systems are involved, and it looks very much like ALS, but instead of being a muscle atrophy, it's a brain atrophy. So it kind of makes sense that they might misdiagnose with that too.
I say ALS and Parkinson's have affected me.
Mm.
Yeah, from my experience, a lot of the persons that are diagnosed up in age, like in the 70s and 80s, usually they're misdiagnosed with MSA when they actually have dementia with Lewy bodies. I've seen that
Right.
such a common thing, and even Parkinson's with dementia, which is something that's actually covered like ALS, but by Social Security. I don't know why that is, but like me, at the age of 44, it's pretty clear cut. It's not obviously dementia or Lewy bodies, but
Right.
when you get up there in age, it's so easy to miss that thing. So this is
Yeah,
what I noticed.
and if they're not knowledgeable too. I mean, that's one of the biggest things I think is that so many doctors are not knowledgeable about this disease, and it's just that rare, I guess. But yet, long story there. But why I don't think it's as rare as we think. But
We
you know
had a
that
kid that I really think she describes it very well. She says it's the disease of the bees. She said the brain,
That's right.
balance, bladder, bowels,
yes.
blood pressure,
Oh,
it's all bees.
The only thing that don't fit into that category would be the speaking, swallowing, the B's and the S's, I guess. Speaking, swallowing.
yeah. And I don't know why it's so hard to diagnose, because the clinical notes and um, doctor visit inside the office. If it looks like Parkinson's, there is an outside chance it could be MSA. Like Parkinson's is pretty easy to diagnose,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
but I don't know why it's such a far stretch for doctors to say, well, wait a minute, there's a 5% chance this might be MSA, not actually Parkinson's. I don't
Because they
understand
don't
why
know
it's so.
about MSA. They literally
Yeah.
don't know about it. When my husband went up to the first neurologist up in my area, that guy had no idea what MSA was. It wasn't even a knowledgeable thing for him. And my husband told me at the very end, toward the very end, that he diagnosed himself. He looked it up online. He put his symptoms in, and of course, didn't tell me all his symptoms. I didn't get all his symptoms, so therefore, I did not come up with MSA. He goes to the neurologist with the list, and he says, "Could I have this?" And he says, "Yes, you might have that."
Wow.
And sent us down to the movement specialist. But the doctor didn't diagnose him. He diagnosed himself. The only one that
Wow.
knew about it was the movement specialist down in Albany. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean,
All the neurologists around me, not the MDSs, but regular neurologists, like I asked them if they ever heard of MSA, and they say only in pre-med school. They,
yeah.
in some course they had. That's it.
Right. And so if it's been that far away from when they heard about it, they're not even, that won't even be in their mind to think that as a diagnosis. So it does make sense. I mean, there's so many strange diseases that are not researched enough. And it happens to be one of them,
I had my palliative nurse say his kind of fresh. He said, "So have you dealt with MSA before?" He said, "Oh yes, I sure have. That's multiple dystrophy, along with atrophy." And I said, "No, you don't know what you're talking about."
Right, exactly. If that's all they think it is muscular dystrophy, or not muscular dystrophy, multiple sclerosis, I'm like, you're
It's
useless.
atrophy.
The funny thing was with me, and I think I said this on the first show, perhaps, that when I found out my husband had it, I ended up talking to a woman whose husband was 49 when he passed away from the disease, and he lived about a mile from my house. And so this lady and I talked for, oh my God, she was so wonderful, like an hour and a half, 2 hours. I literally pulled into the supermarket, parking lot when she called me, and I was like, okay, and I just sat in the parking lot talking to her. But what she said was, hold on, there's a wasp. She told me, she said, because we got talking about having the same general practitioner, she and I did. She said her husband had a different doctor in the same practice, but she said our doctor, which is the same doctor my husband had, knew about this disease already before before she told him about it. And what ended up happening was there was an elderly woman in his neighborhood that had it. And that's probably made, because he was maybe 5 miles, 6 miles from my house. So you've got this person that lived 5 or 6 miles from my house, this one that lived a mile from my house, and then my husband, all in the same area, which I find very fascinating. But yet it's a rare disease. And his
Right.
cousin has it.
I
His
don't think
cousin
it's
has,
as rare as we thought it is.
pardon me.
I don't think it's as rare as everybody thinks it is.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, exactly. But, you know, his cousin has been diagnosed with MSAP because he was diagnosed with Parkinson's first. And then after time, they realized it was moving way too quickly and said, oh, let's look at this again. And so he's lived a little bit longer. Because I found out, probably 2019, I think, I found out that his cousin had it. And I've been, you know,
Like your
talking to
husband's cousin?
my husband's first cousin, yeah. Yep.
Wow.
His father's sister's child, one of her children. And yeah, I mean,
They're
like
blood
that's,
related.
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Now, you know, when I told the doctors about it, because at first they lived here, and he was going down and seeing. There were two doctors in the practice that we saw, and he saw the other doctor who my husband saw for a clinical trial. So we knew both of those doctors, and I told Dr. Moho and his doctor, Dr. Adams, about his cousin having it, and they were like, "Oh, really?" And I said, "Yeah, I was given permission to, you know, share that with you from them. I don't know if they've done anything with it, but I mean, you know, that's not common. So I don't know, but
Do
he's
you
still alive."
do you ever think of why they in this case would have contracted MSA? Do you think it's hereditary or not hereditary, but like chemicals or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, you see on Facebook all the time. You've got people like, you know, were you in the service and were you in this area, or did you have a head trauma as a child, or, you know, and none of those fit my husband. The only thing that I can pinpoint that might be a factor, we've lived here. Well, I've lived here in this town for 28 years, and so 24 years. He lived here 24 years, and there is a they used to throw the PCPs on the road from GE. GE is across the river in another town. There's a lot of cancer in that other town. There's a lot of cancer in my town.
Yeah.
And a lot of weird diseases that have come up. And I know it because of that marathon dance. Because there's not been a single marathon dance since I started paying attention to it in 2004 that I have not known at least one person on that list. Now it's a town of 14,000 people, you know, but these people are like, I mean, there's like, there were a couple kids with bone cancer. There was a kid who had this problem where he couldn't swallow, so he has to always be fed by a feeding tube. He's probably an adult now. Just really like, every once in a while you come up with a bizarre kind of, you know, disease, and you're like, what the heck is that, you know? And, you know, I kind of look at it and I lump it in there and think, I wonder if that had any effects, you know?
Yeah.
Because, you know, originally I would eat local food. I like to, you know, I like to support local businesses and farmers and all that. And once I started making that connection, I stopped that. I stopped. I generally eat organic vegetables and fruits. And I did with him, but he already had the disease by the time I decided to do that. So it was only
Yeah.
within the last 10 years that we got on board with that. But and that's why I wonder, I mean, just in my neighborhood alone, with the houses that I can see out my front door, I can name, let me think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people with mostly with cancer, but they're like, my neighbor next door had breast cancer and he would die, right?
So
Um,
what's going on?
multiple myeloma for 2 people. I mean, it's just, you got to wonder. I
Yeah,
think it's,
I mentioned on one of our last podcasts, I think, if not YouTube, that there's a movie on Netflix talking about DuPont's handling of Teflon for pots and pans, the coating, and
mhm,
how that caused so many injuries and diseases and mutations of cancers and stuff. And they never truly settled for decades now. And
mhm.
things like that we would never know if it wasn't for a lawsuit, making things available. So yeah, I
Exactly.
definitely think it goes. I don't think like TBI, traumatic brain injury, is something to do because I hit my head 2 days before my first symptoms started. But
Mhm.
if if hitting your head gives you MSA, wouldn't there be a lot more people with MSA?
I would think so. Yeah, I would think
Well,
Yeah,
so.
right.
I don't know if you remember me talking about it, but Muhammad Ali was Dr. Dawes' patient, and he had MSA.
Did he? I thought he just had Parkinson's.
Well, he said everybody did.
I didn't know that.
But I had a TBI
Ah,
at a fractured skull, so I
Yeah,
still kind of leave that possibility there.
mhm. And I think that's why people are asking.
yeah,
It's it is a possibility. Any of it's a possibility.
yeah,
But if you think about like even chemicals, like you were saying with DuPont or the chemicals, the PCPs, ultimately that is a brain injury in
Yeah,
essence, right? Because if it breaks the blood-brain barrier, it can injure the brain.
yeah. I think a year and a half ago in the NFL playing football, there was a gentleman that collapsed on the field and technically died from cardiac arrest
Mhm.
because he was hit playing football professionally. He was hit on the exact offbeat of his heart, which
Right,
caused him to go into cardiac arrest instantly and die. So, I mean, it could be maybe the brain gets hit at a certain point related to something else that causes him to say, you never know.
right. And it could be, I mean, traumatic brain injuries in terms of physical injury. Um, you think about when we're kids and we all fell, we've all hit our heads, right?
yeah.
Um, and I mean, I guess if nobody diagnoses something back then, like my husband can't remember, he couldn't remember ever having a traumatic brain injury. So, but I mean, maybe when he was a kid, he had concussion, and because he didn't do anything about it back then, or the kid didn't recognize it and tell mom. I mean, there's so many different, just so much that could be causing it. You
Yeah,
know,
I was assaulted and had my skull fracture in
Mm,
2007. So that was about 13 years before I was doing that.
right?
So
Could
yeah,
be, could be. I mean, I don't. When everybody says that, um, my answer is always just it's a possibility that I just didn't see that with my husband, but again, we don't know.
well, I hope
And
one day that we can find out where it's come from. And
it'd
if
be
they
nice.
like won't be here to see it, then I hope that we can help.
Yeah, I hope so too. You know, I hope that we can get some answers sooner than later,
I
like
agree.
way
Yeah,
sooner than later. Because I feel like so many families are out there just kind of flapping in the breeze, like not knowing. And I mean, not that it makes. I mean, if you know where it comes from, it doesn't change the fact that you have it, right?
Right.
You
It
still
just
have it. The more important part is how do we stop it,
yeah.
or at least slow it down, something, you know, other than just dealing with it. It's symptomatic. What's the word I'm looking for? Um, things to solve symptomatic problems that are never they don't ever seem like they totally solve it either. Like if you're
Yeah.
having
Well, I mean,
constipation, it doesn't seem to, you take the meds for a while and then it doesn't work. So,
Yeah.
I mean, since your husband's passed, in those 4 years, I mean, we now have two types of testing that can actually detect in the future. And if you have like Parkinson's, misfolding alpha synuclein protein right now, and we also have, the Parkinson's Act that was passed by Congress last
Yeah.
year sometime. So I mean, there are there's a lot of trust in the Michael J. Fox Foundation and the government, but just in the last couple of years, we definitely made some pretty good progress going in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is going in the right direction. I agree with you. I'm just saying that, it's just not, it's just not fast enough for any of us that have either dealt with
Yeah.
it or dealing with it. I mean, if it
Yeah.
takes, like, wouldn't you like to have an answer like I can fix it tomorrow?
Yeah,
I
because
can take
you,
these
'cause
meds
you
and
said,
then,
yeah, you said your husband passed away from MSA before he even lost the use of his legs fully, right? His
Yeah.
mobility, and I'm over here at 44 thinking that, hey, I'm ahead of the game because I still got my legs and mobility, and yet, I read about those notes that we had before about you and your husband. It's like you never know; it could be today.
Exactly.
you don't. I mean, but then again, everything. I mean, granted, people with MSA, this is what you're going to die from, but you don't know when, any more than I could walk out on the street and get hit by a car and die.
And that still happened to
Absolutely.
us too.
Right? But it is still it's still a process that's not, it's different than, how to explain this. If you lose somebody and they're going to die, they've been ill, they're going to die.
Mm-hmm.
But you've had a number of years with them before that time. I had 2 years, right? You have time
Just like goodbye, is that what you want to say?
to say what you want to say if you choose to do it, or at
Yeah.
least, like, I did a lot. What I've realized is I do a lot of grieving, and had done a lot of grieving right from day one. I got a therapist early, and I would grieve every little thing that he lost. When he struggled to walk, when he moved from a cane to a walker, when he started talking about moving to a wheelchair, when he started slurring his words, all these things, and when he started complaining about swallowing, all these things I grieved. And to just give it perspective, so I was already doing grieving before he died. So
Mm-hmm.
the grief that I felt afterwards, I guess, I don't want to say it was different, but I had already had that experience enough, I guess, where, like, I knew somebody who, a friend of mine who lost his wife. She was diagnosed and died within 6 months. And
Wow.
even though he was a year and a half out from that, because we started dating, even though he was a year and a half out from that, I realized he had not had much time to grieve. I had so much time. I had been grieving for 3-4 years at that point, because I grieved before he died, and then I grieved after he died. And so when I started dating, or trying to date, I already had 4 years of grief. He only had, less than 2 years, and it took me a long time to understand that because he hadn't done enough grieving, and so we couldn't stay together. We remained friends, but we couldn't stay together.
That's so terrible. Well, Alison, I want to thank you so much for being our first guest, coming back today, talking with us some more. We really appreciate it, and celebrate our 50 episodes in our year as MSA Crusaders.
That's crazy. That's crazy. And I was happy to be your first guest. I was happy to be your guest, period. I feel like
Yeah, we
anytime
appreciate
I
it.
can help out, to me, it helps me.
Well, Alison, even though you're on a patient, you're still at MSA Crusaders. Remember that. We're all MSA Crusaders.
Absolutely.
I'm still doing it.
keep trucking along, Alison. We
That's all
appreciate
I can
you.
do. That's all I can do. So, yep, moving forward. And that's my belief is forward movement. Whether you're sick, whether you're a caregiver, whether you're trying to move forward for not forward, move I don't say we move forward, like after, grieving and maybe getting back into the dating scene. It's not moving forward, it's moving through.
There you go.
Yes.
There's a
Persevering.
difference. Yeah.
We agree.
And still trying to have a good life. So yeah.
Well, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Alison, for showing up, and we definitely want to hear about any more fundraisers or any other opportunities you have with MSA. Please let us know. We definitely want to hear about them.
Definitely, I will do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alison.